Soil health, plant health, human nutrition. If you want to understand the quality of the food on your plate, you can't just look at the supermarket label. You have to start much lower down, right down in the soils. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how soil health shapes plant health and how that in turn influences the nutrition that ends up in our food. We'll look at what the evidence actually says, where the science is still debating things, and what it all means for farmers, eaters, and anyone who cares about resilient food systems. Stay tuned for more. Soils feed almost everything we eat. Let's start with a simple but slightly mind-bending fact. So the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, or the FAO, estimates that around 95% of global food production depends directly or indirectly on soils. Soils are not just where plants grow, they're the living infrastructure of our food systems, but they're also under pressure. A major FAO assessment concluded that about a third of the world's soils are already moderately to highly degraded, with that proportion projected to increase if current practices continue. Some academics think that 70% of global land is currently affected by degradation. Degradation or degraded usually means things like erosion, compaction, loss of soil organic matter, salinization, contamination, all the unglamorous but crucial stuff. Now, a 2024 study in Nature Communications modelled the contribution of earthworms to global crop production. The authors estimated that earthworms are responsible for about 6.5% of global grain production and 2.3% of legume production through their effects on soil structure, nutrients and water. That's mind-blowing. That's roughly 140 million tonnes of grain a year, comparable to one of the world's largest cereal producing countries. So when we talk about soil health, we're really talking about the health of an underground community that helps grow a significant chunk of the world's calories and supports global biodiversity. So what do we actually mean by soil health? Healthy soils gets thrown around a lot, so let's pin it down. Most definitions boil down to some variation of this. Soil health is the capacity of soils to function as living ecosystems that support plants, animals, including humans. Key ingredients include physical structure, so good soils have stable aggregates and pore spaces so roots, air and water can move. Chemical fertility, so enough available nutrients in the soils, a balanced pH, not overloaded with salts or pollutants. And biological life, so a diverse community of microbes and fungi and invertebrates and roots interacting in complex ways. Soil organic matter sits at the centre of this, so it helps bind soil particles into crumbs, holds water like a sponge and buffers nutrients and feeds microbes. Numerous long-term trials show that higher soil organic matter is associated with better yields, improved water retention, and greater resilience to drought across different cropping systems. So that's the what. Now, how does that translate into plant health? Well, there are several pathways. So pathway 1, we can talk about roots, structure and water. So this is the physical foundations. Plants don't just need nutrients, they need soils they can physically live in. So in well-structured soils, roots can explore deeply and widely. In compacted or crusted soils, roots tend to be shallow and stunted, and this limits access to both water and nutrients. Studies across multiple crops show that compaction and poor structure reduce root length, limit water uptake, and increase susceptibility to drought and heat stress. So healthy soil structures do 3 big things for plant health. Number 1, water buffering. More pores and organic matter means soils can store more water after rain and release it slowly during dry spells. Plants avoid the feast and famine cycle. Number 2, oxygen supply. So roots need oxygen as well as water. Now, waterlogged, compacted soils can suffocate roots and beneficial microbes. 3, root exploration. So more volume explored means more interfaces where ions and microbes can be exchanged. So this is physics and architecture. The way we manage soils, heavy machinery on wet ground, deep ploughing, removal of ground cover, either builds that architecture or it breaks it. Pathway number 2, microbes, mycorrhizae and plant nutrition. Now we get to the microbiome bit. So plant roots are not alone down there. They're surrounded by bacteria and fungi and various other organisms that help them access nutrients that they couldn't reach on their own. One of the most important partnerships is with arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. Those fungal networks that connect to root cells and extend out into the soils like microscopic internet cables. Meta-analyses show that mycorrhizal fungi can significantly increase plant uptake of phosphorus, zinc and copper, and often improve nitrogen use efficiency as well. Now these fungi effectively mine the soils beyond the root depletion zone and deliver nutrients in exchange for plant sugars. So it's a mutualistic symbiotic relationship. Now beneficial bacteria contribute too. So certain rhizosphere bacteria, so the bacteria that live around the root zone, they solubilize otherwise unavailable forms of phosphorus. They fix nitrogen directly in legumes or indirectly by supporting nitrogen cycling. They produce hormones that stimulate root growth and branching. So when soils are biologically active, plants essentially have a bigger, smarter rooting system. The flip side is that degraded soils, so soils low in organic matter, repeatedly disturbed, exposed to certain agrochemicals, often show reduced mycorrhizal colonization and simpler microbial communities, which can limit nutrient access and weaken plant defenses. So soil health influences plant nutrition partly by altering who is available to help the plant eat. There's another dimension to soil health as well that's often overlooked. Soils don't just feed the plants, they partly shape the microbiomes we eat with them. Fresh fruits and vegetables carry complex surface communities of bacteria, yeasts and filamentous fungi. These microbes come from the soils, the rhizosphere and the broader farm environment, and together they're sometimes referred to as the edible microbiome. Research has shown that produce grown in biologically rich soils tends to carry a more diverse set of benign or sometimes helpful environmental microbes, the kinds of organisms our immune system evolved with. While washing removes excess soil, it doesn't sterilise plants, and that's a good thing. Some of these microbes interact with our gut microbiota and our gut environment and help train immune pathways or participate in the breakdown of phytochemicals, so plant-derived chemicals that are really important for our health. But the influence is even deeper, so plants themselves are what we call holobionts, so see some of my other videos on this. They're multi-species organisms whose health depends on their associated microbial partners, so friendships between the plants and the microbes, in the soils and in themselves. So soil communities shape the plant holobiont from seed to harvest. Beneficial microbes in the rhizosphere, so around the root zone and in the roots, help plants access nutrients, tolerate drought, resist pathogens, and produce secondary metabolites, so special chemicals that are important for the plant's health. So some of these same metabolites, so things like antioxidants and polyphenols and terpenes, are the very compounds we value nutritionally. In other words, when soils become microbiologically simplified, plants may lose microbial allies that support both their resilience and their nutrient-rich chemistry. Okay, pathway 3, so soil health and plant immunity and stress. Now, nutrients are only half the story. The other half is defense. So healthy soils tend to support plants that have stronger cell walls, maintain better antioxidant status, and can mount faster immune responses. For example, several studies show that mycorrhizal colonization, so colonization by these little fungi in the roots, can reduce disease severity from certain root pathogens and foliar diseases through both improved nutrition and priming of the plant immune pathways. Diverse soil microbiomes can suppress soil-borne diseases by outcompeting pathogens, producing antibiotics, again see my other videos, or triggering plant defense responses. On the stress side, soils with good structure and organic matter help plants ride out drought by keeping more water available in the root zone, heat waves by moderating temperature swings around the roots, and salinity toxicity by buffering ion imbalances and binding some contaminants. All of this feeds into yield stability and plant health, which is a precondition for any discussion about nutrient density. Now, you can't have nutrient-dense crops from chronically stressed plants. Okay, so does soil health really change the nutrient content of our food? Well, this is the question people are asking, and rightly so. If I look after soils, do I actually get more nutrients per carrot, per grain, per bean, etc.? The honest answer is often yes, on occasions not so much, and it depends on what you're measuring. So let's unpack that. It's good to talk about macronutrients versus micronutrients. So for macronutrients like carbohydrates and proteins, soil health matters more for yield and resilience than for concentration per gram of plant tissue. So healthy soils help you reliably grow the crop. They don't always double the protein concentration, although it can affect macronutrients. Where things perhaps get more interesting is micronutrients and phytochemicals. Now, meta-analyses comparing different management systems, such as organic versus conventional, show that some organically grown crops have slightly higher concentrations of certain antioxidants and phenolic compounds, special plant chemicals that are important for our health again. Now, sometimes higher levels of micronutrients like magnesium and iron too, though effect sizes are moderate and vary between crops and sites. Now, studies looking specifically at soil organic matter and micronutrients report that soils richer in organic matter often support higher plant tissue concentrations of elements like zinc and iron, particularly in marginal soils where deficiencies are common. But there are important caveats, so variety, climate and management practices like fertilizer timing and irrigation often have equal or larger effects on nutrient concentrations than organic versus conventional labels. Some nutrients show trade-offs, so higher yields can dilute concentration, so you have to think in terms of total nutrients per hectare as well as per 100 grams of produce. The emerging consensus is, though, healthy soils improve the reliability and overall nutrient output of a system and can enhance the concentration of certain micronutrients and phytochemicals, and probably the quality of what we call the edible microbiome. When you zoom out to population levels, small differences in micronutrients, especially iron, zinc and selenium, can matter a lot, particularly in regions where deficiencies are widespread. So even modest nutritional gains from better soil management can be meaningful. Farming practices that connect soil health to food quality. How do we actually build soil health in ways that support plant health and potentially nutrition? Well, different systems use different labels, so agroecology, regenerative agriculture, conservation agriculture, but they share a few similar core practices. Okay, so number one, keep the soil covered. Cover crops, mulches and residue retention reduce erosion and keep temperatures more stable and feed the soil microorganisms and invertebrates. Number two, minimise disturbance, so reducing deep, frequent tillage helps protect soil structure and mycorrhizal networks and slows down organic matter loss. Number three, maximise diversity, so rotations, intercropping and integrating trees, so agroforestry, supports more diverse soil biota and reduces pest and disease buildup. Number four, feed the soil, so compost, manure, crop residues and roots all contribute carbon. And over time this builds soil organic matter and improves nutrient cycling and provides the foods that those microbes need to eat. Trials combining these practices generally show improved soil structure and infiltration, higher soil organic carbon, more diverse and active soil microbiota and invertebrates, and more stable yields under stress, so things like drought and heat. Now, more research is needed because evidence that these practices consistently increase nutrient density is still quite patchy and context dependent, but they clearly reduce the risk of crop failure and micronutrient shortfalls in poor soils, which is arguably just as important. So protection and diversity is basically the same as what's good for us. Okay, so let's wrap up. Why soil health and food nutrition belong in the same sentence? Soil health clearly shapes whether plants can grow, and how well they can cope with stress, and how efficiently they access nutrients. There's also growing evidence that it can also influence micronutrient and phytochemical contents of the foods that we eat, especially in marginal soils and under stress, although it's not the only factor and we shouldn't oversell it. And then there's the edible microbiome too, so healthy soils likely feed the plants with the microorganisms that we then consume by eating the plants, and some of those microbes may shape our internal physiology. Now, more research is needed here, but we're definitely working on it. Now, the same practices that build soil health, so more cover, less disturbance, more diversity, and organic inputs, are also the practices that make farming more climate resilient and, frankly, more interesting. In other words, if we care about nutritious foods, we can't ignore the underground story. If you found this video interesting or helpful, please do me a huge favour and click the subscribe and like button below. It really does help the channel grow and allows me to keep making these educational videos. Also, check out the new Nature Gut Brain website at www.naturegutbrain.com. And you can sign up to my free newsletter if you like at www.jakemrobinson.com. And remember, stay wild inside and out.